Hello everybody and welcome back to Chivalry 2. Today we're going to be looking at the combat and the basics and a little bit advanced stuff for if you're feeling up for it and learning it a little bit more. Now the first things first, you can hold your block in Chivalry 2. You can hold it down for as long as you want or until you run out of stamina, but I wouldn't recommend holding your block at all if you don't have to. If you're fighting a lot of enemies, you might be wanting to hold that block down to kind of reconsider and think about what you want to do next. But if you're just in a 1v1 or a 2v1 situation, you might want to keep that block down for a minute until you can actually strike and not waste all your stamina. Because yes, if you keep holding your block up, you will drain your own stamina, and if you lose all your stamina and the enemy hits you, you will drop your weapon. You won't be able to hold on to it anymore as you have ran out of breath. And that means that you cannot hold weapons anymore. At least in Chivalry 2, of course. When you attack, there's also a few different ways to attack. Overheads, slashes, stabs, and you can kind of alternate some of how they look by holding the Alt key on the keyboard. I'm not sure how you do it on console, but you can do alternate attacks, so it looks like you do a slash from a different angle, or a overhead from a slightly different look. And you can also feint these. What feinting means is that you start an attack, but then you cancel it, or you can do a morph where you start an attack, but before you commit to that attack, you kind of start a different attack, which, let's say you go for a stab, and as you're doing the stab, you click to a slash, and then you start a slash instead. It will put your enemy off at times, but if you're wearing a very heavy weapon, or using or wielding a very slow heavy weapon, and you're fighting somebody with a one-handed sword, the one-handed sword might be able to get you off guard, as they will be faster, and if they just counter your attack with a simple attack as you are morphing or changing your attack from a stab to a slash, you might feel a lot of pain. Now you can also use your attacks in different ways. You can accelerate them, you can kind of drag them, and what this means is that an accelerated attack, let's say you start a slash from right to left, you turn towards the left, putting your enemy closer to your right side, as when your slash comes through, it'll hit earlier as you have starting a right to left slash, which means they will connect with the enemy sooner. You can do this in the same manner by turning to the right and making it so that it's further away from your enemy, so when you start a right to left slash, it'll take longer for the weapon to collide with the enemy. Now you can also add a little bit of variety to this. Let's say you start a slash and for example, you feint it first and then you start it again, but then you do a heavy attack, so you'll kind of hold your weapon for longer in an attack pose, and then you will slash across. And in this way, you can either accelerate or decelerate or drag your weapon. This is much easier to do with heavy weapons as they're slower to move and they hit hard. So if you do a drag with a heavy weapon, it'll be much easier. Dragging with smaller weapons are not as easy, but it's still possible. It's much easier in third person as well if you play in third person, but I wouldn't recommend it that much, but that's just me. Also, let's say you're now fighting somebody one-on-one. Well, what you can do, instead of losing your stamina by constantly taking a hit to your block and then counterattacking, let's say your enemy is doing a slash and it's about to connect with you. You're holding your block up. What you do now is that you drop your block and you start a slash yourself. What this will do is that you will do a counter, or a chamber in Mordhau it will be called. Countering your enemy will not lose you any stamina, and you'll be basically getting a free counter attack. Now, to spice up a counter, let's say you do an overhead and you counter an enemy overhead, you can then add the feinting and morphing into this. So let's say you block with the overhead to counter, and then you start a slash attack instead, to put your enemy off the timing of when attacks are going to hit. Now this is pretty big, as it will really change how you play the game. Now if you meet multiple enemies, I have this tip for you. If you're fighting more than one person, or let's say you're fighting two people, when one of them attacks you, you counter that attack, but you don't engage the person that just attacked you because they will go defense. Most of the time, you go for the second person that will not expect being attacked yet. And then you kind of try to dance back and forth between the two and, try to do as much AoE as possible, slashing so they both go on the defense. Or let's say you block one, and then maybe you want to hold your block a little bit extra and counter the second person's attack and then go for the first one again, or the second one. You kind of want to be unpredictable. And being unpredictable will grant you more hits, more damage, and more chances to survive on the battlefield. Now, as you can see here in some of the gameplay in the background, I'm using the Maul. It's a very slow weapon, but my goodness, it puts people off timing very easily. It's hard to judge when the weapon's hitting. You can kind of judge it by listening to the audio of the enemy character when they do like a groaning noise, like usually at the end of their little charging noise, they will most of the time come in with an attack. And that's usually a heavy attack. If it's not a heavy attack, they won't say anything, you'll just see your weapon. But also remember, the reason why I'm telling you not to keep your block up the entire time is because I don't want you to get kicked and stunned. When you hold your block and you get kicked, you kind of get stunned for a second before you get back to your feet and ready to fight again. Now, if you keep feeling that you're losing the initiative, that your enemy is just constantly hammering on your block, what you can do is jab. I don't know what the jab button is on consoles, but on PC it's R by default. And if you jab your enemy, you'll basically hit them and interrupt their attack, putting you in the initiative. So that means that you win the initiative, you can start an attack and put them on the defense. Now, if you want to combine this a little bit, you can jab them, they might go into a defensive pose, you can kick them, stun them, get a free hit in. But remember, if you do kick them, you might not want to do a heavy attack if you're using a heavy weapon. It'll take too long for the heavy attack to strike your enemy before they get their block back up again. Now, also remember, during combat, keep an eye on your surroundings. Is there a bag of barrels hanging above the enemy? Maybe you can use that to your advantage. Maybe you can lure a few enemies into fighting you, and then you throw something at it to kill all three at once. Now, in general, you want to be able to read your enemy. And the reason why you don't want to hold your block that much is because, well, you might not be able to read your enemy as well, and they might be able to see, oh, he's constantly holding his block, he's waiting for me to strike, I can kick him, and then strike. So if you're fighting an enemy, don't keep your block open, but if you're going into a pile of people where there's a lot of slashing going on, I would recommend keeping your block up and then try to counter and get a little bit of slash damage in there. Keep your distance, and you should be able to survive even longer. Okay, now you've learned a little bit of how you can use your blocks, your attacks to counter enemies. How about movement? Well, movement is kind of crucial to the entire combat perspective of Chivalry 2. And what I mean about this is that you can do some dodges. You can dodge backwards, left, and right. If you go forwards, you will just do a normal jump. Now, what you want to do is that if you have a long-reaching weapon, you want to try to keep some distance if your enemy is wearing or using a shorter weapon. So let's say you do a strike, you dash backwards, then when the enemy is trying to counter, so they will miss, they have too short reach, you can start your attack and hit them for a free hit as they're in the middle of finishing their attack animation. Now, this can be pretty useful when you're fighting two people as well, as you can try to keep one of your enemies out of reach while you fight the other one, and then going back and forth between the two and confusing them to where you're actually going and being unpredictable. Being unpredictable is your goal in Chivalry 2 combat. It's to be hard to read and doing a lot of damage. Hard to read and hard to understand. So, if you feel like this guide have kind of given you a little bit of help to being a better Chivalry 2 player, please be sure to tell me in the comments down below if it did. If it did, leave a like, maybe subscribe with those notifications turned on. And next time we'll go into a little bit more advanced combat tutorial and maybe how you can play even better. Hopefully this short guide gave you the basics and a little bit of how you can actually understand and use some of this in your gameplay style. Hopefully it did. I really hope you have a great day, and until next time, have a nice evening, or day, or morning, and until next time, bye bye.